I want to start with you because I really do believe we serve our community and we become the teachers as a result of our own excavation. So you can start anywhere you want on your origin story, like
Mm.
where you grew up, what did you want to be, how did you come to this topic, and is this where you found yourself? You know, like I feel like some
Mm.
of us have these winding journeys, and all of a sudden you're like, how did I do this?
Oh yes. Oh yes. It was certainly a winding journey. It can be very funny on social media. Like sometimes we see people and we just sort of assume like, oh, they must have been like this forever. That was
Exactly.
not the case with me. It was quite an evolution and quite a progression. So thank you for giving me some space to speak about it. Um, I did not come to the field, well, to begin, I'm a somatic sex coach. So I work with people in the realm of really healing their relationship to sex itself, which is a beautiful process innately. And then I also support people to be experiencing, to experience really expansive levels of pleasure, sensually and sexually. And then finally, I really am passionate about giving people a space. This truck is so loud. Giving people a space where they can really use pleasure as a place to do some of their deepest healing and as a modality to do some of their deepest healing. So that's the work that I do. But I did not come to the field of sex because I'm innately a particularly sexually expressive person. This was quite an evolutionary process for me. I really came to the field of studying sacred sexuality tools because I was really suffering myself and I was feeling very sexually disconnected, very numb, really had no interest in being sexual with my partner at all. And I had done a good amount of healing up until that point in other arenas of myself. I had learned how to find stillness and find peace and learn how to regulate my nervous system to a certain extent. And I had really come a long way. Um, but there was this piece of me where I was like, oh, I'm really suffering in this area and I don't know how to talk about it out loud. I don't know how to admit it to myself. I don't even know how to admit it to my partner, that I'm really not enjoying sex and I don't know why. And when I finally admitted it out loud, it was a very painful experience for me. But it was this opening. I was like, okay, I can speak this. And maybe this isn't as, maybe I'm not as alone in this as I think. So I began to explore and began to um, search for teachers of, is this something that I can work on? Like I haven't been shown a roadmap of how to find my way back to pleasure, but maybe there's somebody out there that can do that. And pretty soon after speaking it, I found Layla Martin, who is a beautiful, beautiful teacher in the field of sexuality. And I studied with her for several years in order to learn so much of what I know. Um, but what I found was that like it wasn't just about tips and tricks and finding your flirty nature and figuring out what brings you to orgasm and all these things. It was a much deeper process than I had ever anticipated. And that's what really helped me decide that I wanted to that I wanted to do this for the rest of my life because it wasn't Cosmo magazine. And that's what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just you buy these sex toys and you use this technique. No, what I found was that when you work with sexuality, it's a doorway to some of your deepest shadow because it's one of the most shadowed aspects of our reality culturally. It's everywhere to a certain extent, right? It's like in the media, it's in advertising, it's like being used to manipulate us, but it's also deeply shamed and deeply repressed. And this kind of simultaneous, like um, drowning in it and having it repressed is very painful for so many people. And when you can have a safe space to begin to open up, to begin to explore, to begin to express what you're experiencing, some of that shame starts to lift, and it's really a doorway to something beautiful. to it can be a pathway to profound self-love, exploring your deepest self-worthiness. There's so much that goes into sexually thriving. It's the ability to know what you desire. It's the ability to be able to speak your no and your boundaries. It's having the worth to know that you're worthy of receiving. It's feeling safe and secure enough in order to give. So there's so much to explore inside of sexuality. And I'm just so grateful to have found this world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, where do I start? I think it's important for people to understand like history and why how we came to this place we are in society today. And you mentioned that it's everywhere, sexuality is everywhere, and the type of sexuality also that we're exposed to, I feel like is a heightened form that because I think it's a spectrum, but yet it's suppressed. Like we don't talk about it. We're not encouraged to express ourselves, and especially the dark aspects of sexuality, like saying no and being able to be in our power. Um, and we do live in a puritanical society where, especially for people who identify as women, your desires and sexuality have been repressed and suppressed. And I think a lot of women don't connect with their sexuality and their desires because it's seen as bad, air quotes bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was the first step that you took? You mentioned that it was with a partner that you said something's not right, and you were like communicating with your partner. But how did you even know that that was something to
Mm-hmm.
communicate? You know what I mean? Like, how did you know that that
Mm-hmm.
was not normal?
Yeah. It took me a really long time to be able to even come to terms with it within myself, because what happens when an aspect of our reality is not safe to talk about out loud is that it's a very isolated and lonely experience. And many of us are stuck just like trying to navigate it within ourselves internally, which is, if you've ever tried to navigate anything challenging alone, it's very difficult. And we come up with all these stories about how it's our fault, or we come up with stories about, oh, well, this is normal. I'm just supposed to feel this way during sex. And it
Hmm.
can be this huge jumble. So it took me a while. For me, what I was experiencing was that I had been with my partner for several years, and it's the partner that I'm still with now. Um, we've been together for a very long time. But I was wanting to sexually connect to my partner, but I felt this tremendous resistance towards it. I found myself like um, avoiding it. I
Hmm.
found myself like making every excuse for why I didn't want to. And then when we would be intimate, I was feeling really stressed and very self-conscious, and like I was doing this chore or this obligation and going through the motions of it, and in some ways feeling a very like emotionally disconnected, like I wasn't able to be present in the moment. um, and I just wrote it off as, well, maybe that's just me, and maybe I just don't enjoy sex that much. And I came up with all these stories, and it took me a while of really getting quiet with myself before I was able to admit, like, oh, like my nervous system is dysregulated during sex. Like I'm not feeling safe. I'm feeling like I'm going into fight or flight response. And it just became so painful on so many different levels for myself and my partner. And it wasn't what I desired to experience. I had some sort of vague idea of what I desired to experience, but it took me a while to finally admit, like, this is not what I want. And I just want to take an opportunity here for anybody who's listening to normalize all of this. So, one of the traps that so many of us fall into, including myself, is being like, well, this is just a me problem. Like, this is just something that's uniquely wrong with myself. And normal people just effortlessly have sex and have an amazing time doing it. And it's really not true. This is such an incredibly common lived experience to have anything from numbness or discomfort or feeling disinterested or disconnected or feeling really confused or lost or stressed out during sex or self-conscious or like you can't get out of your head. These are all incredibly common lived experiences. And I just want to really be very, very clear about that because that can be the first step in moving forward is saying, oh, this is something that a lot of people are experiencing, and it is so much because of the culture that so many of us live in. Thank you for speaking about Puritanism. There's just so many layers of shame, of feeling like we're bad. And so many of these messages are not conscious, right? We're not consciously aware that those are circulating inside of us. Many of them we've received from a very young age. They've been pushed into our unconscious. And so we may not even be aware that that's what's moving through us as we navigate sex. Stories of um, being sinful or naughty or dirty or wrong or bad. These are not stories that help us feel safe, that help us drop into pleasure. And so the pathway back to pleasure is really a pathway of rewriting those narratives, reclaiming pleasure for our own, walking back to our inherent innocence and our inherent wholeness as sexual beings. So it's deep. Yeah.
Deep. Well, it's deep because from a young age, you're taught that pleasure is not for the woman, it's for the man. And I just was fortunate enough to have a mother and father who was very open about this topic, which is kind of rare in Korean culture.
Mm,
My mom actually told me and my sister about the birds and the bees, not using the birds and the bees, like very graphic terminology and like physical features. And they really taught us not to be ashamed of this arena at all. And so I was very fortunate in that way. And she always taught me that it's supposed to be equal, like giving and receiving. It's not supposed to be just for the man. It's supposed to be also in a heterosexual kind of uh,
mhm.
interaction. And so, but like so many people aren't taught that because sexuality and pleasure isn't taught to us. We have to kind of go to these back channels to figure it out. And I remember in like high school, I would be like, so, wanting to talk to my friends about sex, and they'd be like, Laura, oh my gosh, you're so sex crazy. And I'm just like, what? Like, this is such a fun topic to talk about.
Yes. Oh, so beautiful that they gave you that space and opened it up as a safe space for you to explore and that you felt safe speaking about it with your friends. I'm so grateful that I had friends like that in high school that started to open me up a little bit. It's such a gift because it's like, wait, we're allowed to talk about
You're
this?
like, wait, what are you doing
Yeah.
there? What? But I know not everybody is comfortable with this topic because their parents told them that it was, like you said, naughty, or you're not supposed to share it, you're not supposed to talk about it. It's very taboo. Like keep it under wraps, keep it private.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the last thing you would talk about at a dinner party, right? Or like a
Not
certainly a
if you're around
family dinner.
me.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah. Well, that's when the party gets fun, right?
Oh my
Is
God.
when somebody opens up that channel. We're like, oh, we can be whole people here. We can talk about our real life experience here. We kind of drop down a level from like that surface level small talk to like, let's talk about sex. Like we're adults.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's how I know that we've gone through like surface level, like you said, to a deeper level because we were just sharing before we press record that it's it's our deepest innate instinctual cravings, our feelings, and not just in a sexual intercourse way, but what we're drawn to, like what we desire in life, what we and I really do. It's like an energetic connection. It's like attracts like, it's this like thread that weaves through life. Like how else are you supposed to know what you are moving towards? It's just like
Yes.
this beacon call.
Yes. Yes. In some ways, the repression of sex is it's also a repression of desire in general. So when we're not raised in a world that tells us that it's safe or acceptable to explore our own desire, to explore pleasure within our own body, to claim pleasure within our own body, to be the source of our own pleasure in our body, um, there's this kind of large scale generalized repression of desire in general, even beyond sexual desire, like just the question, what do you desire? It's kind of complicated in this world because many of us have been told that it's safer to go into the role of the people pleaser or the role of the martyr or the role of somebody who fulfills other people's wants and needs and not our own, particularly for people, really for all people, but particularly for people who are born or assigned female at birth. Um, this role of taking care of others and putting ourselves last, is deeply ingrained. So in my work, very first session, the first question is, what do you desire? What do you desire to be experiencing? This can be a hard question to answer. And sometimes it takes some time to kind of come up with some initial answers and then say, wait a minute, that's actually not what I desire. That's actually what my partner desires. That's what my family desires for me. That's what my friends desire for me. That's what society as a whole desires for me. What do I desire? It's it's an infinite place of digging that I find just has so many rewards.
Mhm.
It's a real path to self-intimacy, just returning over and over again in big ways and small ways to this question, what do I desire? And is it safe for me to have desires? I think that many of us have received messaging that it's greedy or selfish or just evil in some way to have desires. And I really like to teach people, and it's a process of rewiring and relearning about it, but um, you were sharing, this is such a beautiful way to express it. Desire comes from the stars, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
comes from cetus and day. They're two Latin words. Together they make dicere, which means from the stars.
Mm,
So it's like
yeah.
something innately within you.
Yeah. And what if we could dare to and be bold enough to really step into that? Like, what if my desires were some larger force of life moving through me?
Mhm.
What if they have an inherent purpose, even if it's just the desire to rest or to feel pleasure or to find ease? What if there's some sort of larger purpose, or what if the desire to thrive in business and in all these different areas, like what if there's this larger purpose to them? What if I'm being guided through them? And I have found this over and over again within myself and with my clients. The path, like if you can really get in touch with what you deeply desire and you can take steps towards it, that path, that very specific path towards that desire, will have this way of bringing up all the things in you that need to be brought up so that they can be integrated and dissolved and eliminated. It's like it's the path to healing some of your deepest wounds, is the path towards moving towards your desires. I'm sure you've experienced this in so many facets of your life, but like for me, when I figured out that my destiny was to work in this field, when I was taking steps towards that, like I had to work on so much of my shit. Like my fear of being seen, my fear of being known, my fear of sharing my gifts, my fear of being authentic, my fear of rejection, just my fears in general. I had to really meet them and be with them and learn to be intimate with them in order to do the work that I do today. And it's the same with fulfilling my desire to have thriving sex in my partnership. Like I had to heal those same wounds through that process. Um, my fear of being vulnerable, my fear of receiving pleasure, my fear of being enough. Those are wounds that had to be resolved through me working towards pleasure. So I love to talk about that concept. Like these aren't just some ridiculous random desires. Like they have a way of doing some really deep healing if we follow them.
Oh my gosh, I have chills all over my body. It's like desires running through my body. Yeah, so
Yes.
in my book, I start people off with your vision, and not your vision like that's small, the bigger vision for your life, like the grand vision you have, your dream, and not just your dream like this, I had a dream last night, but your dream of your overall path. And I start with that specifically because people will have resistance then, like right after. They'll be like, I want to be an actress. And they'll have that vision, but then immediately they'll be like, having all those stories of why they can't and why it's not possible. And similar to what you were just saying, oftentimes being able to visualize and tap into what you desire is actually the information you need to do the healing work, because then all that resistance comes up
Yes.
immediately. And then it comes to the surface, you do that shadow work, you do that healing work, and it almost bridges the gap from where you are to where you want to be. And I think that's why desire is so important. And like that book, Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown, is so important
Mm-hmm.
because, as you know from my content on my channel, there's a reason why they're trying to suppress our desires. Because how dare we have the audacity to dream and to have agency over our bodies and our dreams? And I really believe when we stand in what you're saying, it's something much deeper, it's more spiritual, it's our soul connection, then we wouldn't need somebody telling us what to do or who to love or what to buy.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
Mm-hmm.
much deeper. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They do not want us to know what we truly desire. They want to feed us desires and convince us that it's ours. And I'm very, very passionate about the topic of self-pleasure for this exact reason. I do not think it's a coincidence that self-pleasure has been systemically demonized and portrayed as something that is evil and wrong and punishable, uh, because it's so liberatory. The act of self-pleasure, and there's different levels to self-pleasure. There's also this like constructed shame-based way of interacting with self-pleasure, which can also be very painful. But when you learn tools to really be intimate with self, to offer your body sensual or sexual pleasure in ways that feel deeply fulfilling to you on all levels of you, uh, this is a radical self-liberation tool, because if everybody knew how to give their own body exalted levels of pleasure whenever they desired,
Yes.
the whole system would fall apart.
Yes. It's wild, right?
Yeah. This narrative that it's not okay to give your own body pleasure. And this is so painful for so many people. They come to adulthood and then they think that they can only access pleasure through other people. Oh my God.
No.
It sets us up for so much pain.
Mm.
Um, and then we don't know how to access pleasure with other people because we've never been given the space to know how to access it within ourselves. But I mean, if you knew that you were worthy and deserving of that every day and that you could give it to yourself for free, the whole system of capitalism would like really, really, it wouldn't work as properly because the whole system is built off of you feel lack and you can't give that to yourself, so you have to buy this product in order to feel good. Um, yeah, so I'm very, very passionate about teaching people how to give that to themselves. I think it's revelatory.
It's also our creative energy.
Mm,
So the first thing we learned in yoga school, I went to study yoga in India, and it was so funny because there were like all my teachers were Indian men, and the first like day of, of class, he was basically telling all the men like you can't masturbate. Well, also the women too, but for people who identify as women, we are able to channel and hold our creative energy and use it intentionally to manifest. And like those weren't the exact words that he used, but um, basically we are literally creators within our own body, and that's basically the first thing that we were taught in school. And then even in like these books that talk about like being wealthy and being rich. That one book by now I'm not going to remember the name of the book, but it has a specific chapter about sexual transmutation and how to use sexual
mm,
energy to channel your wealth energy. And I write about that
mm,
in my book too. Thank goodness the publisher said yes, it can be in there. But basically, I believe that when you can channel this sexual energy and not necessarily use it for sexual intercourse, like you can, and you can
mhm.
use it to self pleasure, but also to create something and channel that into something because it's just latent energy. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, so juicy. Yeah, this is really part of reclamation of your own sexual energy of like, oh, I can do whatever I want with this. Like this is a force for just profound energy. So I can learn how to create this source of energy within my own body, and then I can use it for whatever I want. I don't have to disperse it over here, disperse it over here. I can choose. Um, and there's definitely a very deep connection between sexual energy and creativity. And, in my own journey of learning how to build pleasure back in my body again, I stumbled upon the fact that when I was infusing pleasure inside of my body, once I was really practicing it regularly, I would start to get these like really big bursts of creative insight of like, ideas for entire podcasts or like an entire book or an entire course, and it would just like flow into my body as I was giving myself pleasure. And I was like, what is going on right now? This is crazy. Because I had been, conditioned in this sort of paradigm that like you can only come up with ideas or you can only like source structures for things or insights for things through like really hard brainstorming and like sitting down and putting pen to pencil and writing and coming up with all these different ideas. And when I started getting them spontaneously through pleasure, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And I definitely use pleasure for that purpose now. A little secret that I don't often admit to people, like everything that you see of me on social media, all of my TikTok videos, if you've ever been in my courses or my memberships, all the lectures that I give, all completely downloaded through self-pleasure.
I
Like
love it.
I
I love it.
I do not sit down and think, what am I gonna make? And that's why sometimes they're really kind of ridiculous because I'm not like using the cortical part of my brain to construct these ideas. They come fully formed, sometimes word for word. They come to me and I'm just like, okay, that's the next TikTok video, or that's the next lecture. Yeah, I mean, it's a really fun way to come up with ideas. I
I'm like,
would highly
are you
recommend
gonna
it.
do? Are you gonna do a behind the scenes creative session? Get ready.
I've definitely thought about it, like a day in the life video. Of like my pleasure tools next to my notebook, next to
Yes,
my phone, so I can do voice memos. It's like pleasure, record, pleasure, record.
I love it.
This is the next wave of business, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and you offer so many. I think the first video I saw of yours was your erotic playlists. And okay, so I'm going to be very open here, and I'm pretty open, and I've spoken about this topic before, is I also use self-pleasure under like full moons to
Mhm.
manifest or
Yes.
get these creative downloads, but I do use music as a way to be in my body. And so when I
Hmm.
saw that, I was like, okay, it's not just me, but this is like a professional saying that it works. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and like, talk more about that. I love these playlists, by the way.
Oh, I'm so glad you're enjoying them. Yeah, I've been so grateful that they've been resonating with people. And it's been really fun to collaborate with people too and ask people, like, what is your erotic song? And it's so fun to feel everybody's different flavors. Um, Music is just so powerful. Wow. I mean, eh, there's so many different flavors of eroticism to explore. And many of them we've never explored within our own body before, right? We tend to get stuck in like certain channels of like, oh, this is what Eros looks like for me, or this is like the archetype that I fall into when I'm in pleasure. And music can help us explore like the wide, different diversity of pleasure in a really powerful way. So, there's sort of ethereal and light and fairy like pleasure that feels sort of like twinkly and champagne like. And then there's like deep, moody, aggressive pleasure. There's sort of like sink your teeth and claw something type of pleasure. There's rebellious forms of pleasure. There's very sweet and like nourishing and heart centered forms of pleasure. And then, I go off into all different terrains. I love to explore like mixing heavier emotions with pleasure. So navigating like sorrow through pleasure, or even like shame through pleasure or fear through pleasure, and being able to navigate those kind of heavier emotions by mixing pleasure with them. So music is really, the reason I came up with the playlist is I was like, I know that there's this like immense diversity of eroticism that exists, but I'm not sure how to talk about it with people in a way that makes sense with words. And music has been a really beautiful bridge for that, for people to be like, oh, yeah, there's like this type and this type and this type. Yeah.
Yeah, and you spoke about anger and rage and pleasure, and I was like, oh yeah, like that anger, that hate masturbating.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 I mean, there's this deeper truth that unfolds from all of this, right? It might sound silly, it might sound paradoxical. We're not really typically used to pairing these things together, but the experience of being human, it's all jumbled together, right? And this is why pleasure can be such a powerful tool for navigating our reality because, um, all of these emotions are just, they're flavors of aliveness. They're flavors of our human experience. And you're allowed to have all of them.
Mhm.
And you're allowed to feel them. You're allowed to move them through your body. You're allowed to harness power from them. You're allowed to take your rage and claim it and say, this is mine. And I'm going to go into my room and I'm going to put on some angry music and I'm going to be angry. I'm going to punch a pillow. I'm going to write down my angry thoughts. I'm going to bite something. I'm going to claw something. I'm going to bring myself to orgasm as I'm feeling this rage. I'm going to channel this anger into this project, or I'm going to channel my anger into this form of being passionate about this over here. Like you can use all of it. And I think the more that we break out of these small boxes of like, my sadness looks like this and my anger looks like this, and really just the process of like letting ourselves feel them is a revelation within ourselves, and using like devoting time to feeling them and honoring those emotions as portals to
Yes,
incredible aliveness.
yes, I truly believe that. Um, to be honest with you, I feel like the United States is a country of um, wanting versus desiring. I think I mentioned to you the want, the etymology of the word want is to lack. And I think a lot of our desires or what we think our desires come from a place of lack. Um, what are some cultures or countries that you've experienced that really do desire well?
Mm, mm. Mm, what a beautiful question. Um, I have worked from people from around the world. I work through Zoom, so I've worked with clients from around the world, and I've also trained with a lot of incredible people from around the world who are also sex coaches. Some cultures that desire well. I mean, it's not the United States.
No,
We are not it.
no.
I do find that there are some places in Europe where it is a little bit more comfortable and a little more socially acceptable to talk about pleasure. It's more socially acceptable to I know that in like some Scandinavian countries I've spoken with other coaches where they said like it's more common to give children space to explore their own bodies or to spend time like nude in the home. It's just more normal. Um, Countries that use like saunas and things like that, where they're like collectively gathering nude to be in the sauna. Um, but I'm sure that there's so many different embodiments and expressions of pleasure cross-culturally that I have yet to experience. Yeah, what's your experience of this?
I just noticed this so starkly when so we had a 3 year pandemic.
Yeah,
Just like trying to forget that word from my
exactly.
and this is the most time I've spent not traveling. I'm a
Mhm.
traveler. That's how I learn. And I went to Cartagena in February for my cousin's wedding. And I was like, I'm not depressed. I just live in the United States because it was every day. It's a culture that's celebrated through music and dance and food and singing, and it's so vibrant and colorful. And I was just like, what the heck? Everything in the United States is so like serious, and especially since living in New York and growing up in New York, everybody's so focused on work and stress and busying and everything's beige. It's like,
Yeah.
and I started realizing that I started being like that. That's why I painted my wall pink. I know you can't really see that it's pink, but I was just like, I need to start living. I need to start like having more
Yes.
joy and vibrancy. And I also think Italy does it really well. Like they're
Mhm.
just like amore, amore. Like everything's like just like love and enjoy life. And so I was just wondering in your experience if you observed that.
Absolutely, absolutely. There definitely are cultures where it's living a more pleasure-based lifestyle in so many different facets, right? Whether that's sex or whether that's like taking time midday to rest, or whether that's like prioritizing gathering in community every night. Like those are forms of pleasure that are not very popular in the United States. And I know that many people who grew up in other countries and then come here have expressed that. Um, yeah, the idea here of like painting your wall pink, as you're saying, or like just wearing clothes that bring you joy, or like taking time to take a bath, like these are really taught to be like frivolous in our culture or like non-productive. It's sort of looked down upon. And I think the reclamation of that is, for me, it was life-saving. Like there just came a point in my life where I was like, I can't live without pleasure anymore. I can't live just focused on work anymore. Like I think there might be something more here. And it really can be that simple. I really like to teach pleasure as like this infinite spectrum, right? It can look like masturbation, and it can look like when you're putting on lotion in the morning, just like gliding it along your skin and taking a moment to appreciate all the different corners of your body. It can look like taking pleasure when you're brushing your hair. It can take like It can look like taking a sip of coffee and just taking a minute to be with that instead of doing five other things at the same time. Uh, it can be everywhere. So we don't have to always begin with like these huge steps.
Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about is a slower, more intentional life, noticing things and taking up space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Do you think that's why, um, do you think that's why more cishet men are lonely and dying alone? Because
Mm.
I'm just thinking, because women who are attracted to men are reclaiming and are exploring more of their sexuality and their desires, and cishet men aren't fulfilling those needs, that they're
Mm.
kind of like, fuck them. I'm just going to do my own thing, self pleasure myself, and maybe discover other ways of expressing my sexual desires that are above and beyond just cishet men.
Absolutely. I mean,
Are you on that side of TikTok?
oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I fully support it. There's so much juiciness to explore in this topic. I love that you brought this up. I mean, with all the challenges of living right now, there is an acknowledgement of like, this is an incredible time to be alive in terms of how far we've come as women. And just as like people who are either women or gender expanses, we've come so far and we still have a very long way to go. But it is, I think many of us forget that it has been such a short amount of time that we have had this kind of sexual liberation at all. Our parents, our grandparents, it was a completely different world when it came to being a woman or it came to being a gender expansive person. I mean, really, when we're getting down to it, and this is like a very strong thing to speak, but like this is the first time in history that sex is really consensual.
Mhm.
So for previous generations, for the majority, it was an expectation that you got married very, very young. And you had sex when your husband wanted to have sex. It was not really very optional. And that wasn't the case for everybody, but like for a large majority, it was. And so now we have these decisions around like, do I want to get married?
Mhm.
Do I want to have children? These are choices now that have really not been available on this scale before. So this is a really big deal. And with birth control and just with this choice of like, oh, I can make my own money, I can be self-sovereign. Um, the sexual implications of that are just vast. And it's just like this incredible multi-tier orgasmic time to be alive. I'm so grateful because you can source your pleasure for yourself. And in that sourcing, you can have choice of how you like to experience pleasure with others. And, you know, one wave of this is sort of recognizing that to a certain extent, men do not know how to fulfill the pleasure of women. And that is largely true. And while that can be very hard to receive as men, as cishet men, I think that this is a really important opening point where we can realize that like it's not necessarily their fault that they also do not know how to offer pleasure. We all grew up in a world where we were not taught about sex very much at all, let alone how to give and receive pleasure effectively. This was not taught to us. Um, for most, the only source that we had to go to is porn,
Mhm.
which is a whole wide topic. There can be a lot of beauty that can come out of porn, and there can also be a hell of a lot of toxic information that is not necessarily conducive to giving people pleasure effectively. And
Oh,
so it's really nobody's fault. And I think the first step is really like coming to terms with this on all sides of gender of like, I don't think we know. I don't think you know how to effectively give us pleasure. Maybe I don't know how to effectively give you pleasure. And that's okay. We can learn,
Mhm.
right? This is the time to learn. This is the time to voice. This is what I like, and this is how I want it. And let me show you how I like to receive pleasure. Like, you may not know how to give it to me, but let me show you. Or this is the time to speak out loud. I actually don't know how to do this. Can you show me? Can we dialogue about it? Can we find other resources and read books about how to give each other pleasure? Can we experiment? Can we shift out of this paradigm of that sex is just this place where we need to um, perfectly give orgasms to each other, and this kind of like performance competitive model of needing to prove your worthiness, into this realm of like play and exploration of like, maybe there's stuff that I don't know, but we can figure it out together. And, that does require a willingness to explore and to learn and to try things and to say yes. But I think in that place, we can come together to create some really amazing sex.
I love how optimistic you are and how affirming you are, because I think one of my limiting beliefs is that men are self-serving, cishet men are self-serving, and they, because the world has been built by them and serves them, that now all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, where are all the women? Like, why don't they like me? And they have to literally be self-aware and ask themselves, wait, maybe this isn't all about me. And again, this, I'm just generalizing, but I'm saying, like, I think this is why so many, there's this like huge backlash on TikTok of these like cis het men getting angry on their podcast, being like, women's rights and feminism is screwing up the entire world. And I just want to say, well, maybe you need to like read a book and like look at a diagram, or just like be
Mhm.
humble enough to say you don't know the female anatomy, and maybe this is a chance for you to like explore and look and ask questions.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm being very, very optimistic, but what is required is humility.
Mm-hmm.
That is the doorway to men learning how to truly, truly pleasure women is humility, and is admitting, oh, I might not have been just born knowing exactly how to give pleasure. And there's so many different systems that kind of like lock that ignorance into place. Um, I could go on and on about this, but they are right. Like, it is messing up the system.
Mm-hmm.
Women's liberation and feminism is messing up the system. And it's a system that deserves to be messed up. It
Yes.
deserves to be scrambled up and rearranged and wiped clean. And our standards are raising. Our
Mm-hmm.
standards are raising because we have the opportunity to speak our truth now safely.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's happening. And we're sharing really liberatory information with each other at a really rapid pace. So it is a huge adjustment. It's a huge adjustment. But ultimately, if men are, and I want to really like dig into the nuance of this, because I work with men as well. And that stance of, I don't exactly know what these men are saying. I haven't really spent a lot of energy on these podcasts, but this stance of like, oh, women don't know what they're talking about or whatever, or they're messing up the old system. It's coming from a place of deep insecurity. And it's hard to come to terms with the fact that maybe you're not just a sexual rock star off the bat, and you weren't just born that way. That's hard to admit. That's hard to come to terms with. That takes a lot of self-awareness. Um, and I think there are a lot of men who do deeply and genuinely want to give pleasure to their partners, but they haven't had a space to be able to admit out loud, like, I'm struggling. I'm struggling sexually. I'm struggling to please my partner. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how to do it differently, because none of us were taught the skills to even talk about sex with our
Oh,
partners.
and talk and communicate. I know. Yeah.
that has never been modeled for us. So for some people, that can be the scariest thing in the world, is to talk about sex with the person that you're having sex with, and to actually check in and say, are you experiencing pleasure?
Mhm.
Is there something that I could be doing differently in order to give you pleasure? Are there things that we haven't explored that you'd like to explore? Are there ways in which you're not experiencing pleasure? That's a hard conversation.
Oh, yeah. And like you said, not the people pleasing, right? Because I've had to had conversations with my exes just really saying like, you suck at this. And
Mm,
I should have been a little bit more careful of how I communicate, but I was just like, you're not doing it right. Why aren't you paying
mhm,
attention to me?
mhm,
And it was so frustrating because here I was thinking, because of their, I don't know if you like this term body count, but the amount of women that they've had experience with, I would
mhm.
assume that they would have experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know what they're doing.
Yes, yes, there's so many painful layers to this, but many people have had sex with lots and lots of people, but we are not taught to speak our needs during sex. So many women will not speak up and express when they're not experiencing pleasure or when they would like something to be done differently. Many women have not been taught how to say, I would like to have this happen to me, or can you please do it this way? Or here, try this. That's not words that are modeled for women often. And so that is definitely not women's fault. We've been shamed out of speaking up. But that lack of speaking up leads to men assuming that everything is fine during sex. And, we're not, many men are not even making sure that their partner is achieving orgasm. Many men are just assuming, because that conversation also isn't modeled. So there's just a lot of shame on both ends of the spectrum. And it's an ego death of sorts as a man to really admit, okay, maybe I don't know how to please you. Really vulnerable stuff. I have thought a lot about this and how I can make this easier for both involved. I'm on a mission to do so because
Yeah.
it's really like a lose-lose situation for both people. Like, men could be experiencing so much more pleasure as well, but they haven't been taught these tools of how to do so. So I think it's a lose-lose situation on both ends.
I ultimately believe that men need to know how to create a safe container and know how to create an environment of safety, which again, I'm generalizing, so nobody come after me. But like when we think about us like safety, I most women, most cis women never think about a man because they're the ones that wield the most violence in our world.
Mm,
And so I think men have to understand what it means to create a safe environment and safety, consensuality as well, having consensual um, sex and also partnership, but also women know when things feel safe. We were like instinctually taught that. Like
mhm.
when you're in an environment that doesn't feel like that, like the hairs on the back of your neck go up. So I think one of the things that I always tell my guy friends and my cousins is like, does your partner feel safe? Period. And are you
Yeah,
creating a container for intimacy? Because that's what it really is. Like, I will share with you how I feel if I feel safe enough to do so.
absolutely. Thank you for speaking that. Yeah, I teach everybody that I work with, and it's often a little disappointing to people, but like the number one sexual alchemical ingredient, the number one ingredient that will rapidly elevate your experience of pleasure and sex is safety.
Mhm.
That's it. That's the foundation of all pleasure is safety. And a lot of people are like, wah, wah, like that's not very hot.
But it is hot,
It's the hottest thing that
super hot.
exists. It's the
Oh,
hottest thing that exists. And really, it comes down to nervous system regulation. Can you create an environment in which somebody's nervous system feels deeply regulated?
oh, that's
And
the
they're,
craziest thing to me. Yes.
whew,
Yes, you're speaking
Ooh.
my language.
Yes, yes. And I could get very nerdy about this. And I do, like in my courses, I explain it more thoroughly because I talk about this exact topic. But basically, like there's two branches of your nervous system. There's one for stress and there's one for relaxation. And if you're in the stress zone of your nervous system, pleasure is very difficult to access. You can only get like a small little sliver of what's available to you. And so it is literally a nervous system shifting process in order to access that deep, rich, expansive layer of pleasure that we so want. And yeah, now I'm trying to think about like what I could offer. What I will say is that I think one of the huge boundaries that people face within themselves and within partnered sex, this narrative that is shown to us over and over again in movies and TV shows and music videos of all this stuff of like making out for 5 seconds and then immediately going to penetration. I have a complaint to file. This is a big problem. It's a huge problem because when you look at the statistics, this is because that's the way it's modeled in media. This is the way that most people are having sex. They're having maybe 1 to 2 minutes of foreplay.
Mhm.
Big problem in order to achieve pleasure, just on a biological level. For people with vulvas,
Mhm.
it biologically, on average, everybody's different, but to really achieve full levels of pleasure expansion, it's around 40 minutes to warm up the body.
Mhm.
And that is different for people who have penises, but for people with vulvas, it takes that long to truly reach that level of real, like, pleasure terrain where like all systems of your body are ready for that really explosive, expansive experience. So safety is created through foreplay. Like that's a beautiful avenue to creating safety long before you're reaching penetration of
Mhm.
any kind, fingers, phalluses, anything, taking time to connect. And that looks very different for different people, and people have different things that turn them on. But really taking that time to like caress skin, to massage each other, to hold hands, to talk with one another, to connect and smell each other and feel each other's bodies, this is necessary to the animal part of ourselves in order to feel regulated.
Mhm.
We need to be warmed up.
Yes.
And if you are not enjoying sex, for so many people, this is the reason. We're not taking the time to warm up ourselves erotically, but also to warm ourselves up in terms of feeling safe.
Mhm. Wow, 40 minutes. I thought it was like 20, but 40 minutes is it's a minute. Wow. It's not just like wham bam, thank you, ma'am. It's like it's a slow process.
Mhm. And that doesn't mean that you have to take 40 minutes, but if you're feeling like you're yearning for time,
Mhm.
this is your permission slip. Like, take your time. And, that can be hard to do. That can be hard to do in a fast paced world where we have a million other responsibilities and where we're told that sex isn't important,
Mhm.
right? So it's like we're slipping it in at the last minute when we're already exhausted and tired. And it can be really beautiful to put aside dedicated time to say, like, okay, like I'm going to create systems in place the same way that you would to get anything else done. Like, I'm going to make sure that I have time to drop into pleasure so
Mhm.
that I'm not rushing into it when I'm exhausted and like just powering through it and doing it as fast as possible. Like, giving yourself time and space,
Yeah.
asking for that foreplay.
Ooh, yes. What do you
Yeah.
say about Gen Z and that they're not having sex?
Mm. This was brought up to me in another podcast, and I don't know much about this. Can you tell? I'm like, what?
They're
Gen Zers are not having sex? Tell me more.
they're the generation that aren't having sex because they're the ones that grew up with technology. So they are very much in their heads and not in their bodies. I'm a
Mm.
millennial, so um, I think I'm the last generation where we didn't necessarily grow up with technology, but we had it as growing up as adults. So they're very much disconnected with their body, and they're the generation of swiping. So they
Mm,
don't take the time to meet people in person. They're not the people who like take the time for true intimacy and physical connection.
mhm, mhm.
So generationally, they're the generation that aren't having sex.
Yeah, yeah, this totally makes sense. This totally makes sense. And I think there's a number of different factors going into this. Um, we spoke about a few of them already, but like, technology certainly is one of them. And I think like feminism is another element of this. As I said before, like this is the first time that we're having the choice of whether we want to be having sex or not.
Mhm.
And so part of that adjustment culturally is taking time where we're saying, no, I don't want to have sex, and reclaiming that and saying, like, I'm not going to just have sex when this other person wants to have sex. I'm going to choose when I want this for myself. I think that's an element of it. I think porn is a large element of this as well. And people having sex with themselves through porn instead of with other people. Um, I have faith, if I have anything to do with it, I have faith that we're going to come back around with
You're
Gen
gonna
Z.
come back? Okay. Well, like,
I'm in TikTok trying to ignite that sexual flame. I've got my boots on the ground. I think that there's such a beautiful opportunity to merge the world of technology and of real life sex. We can use the internet to learn about real, consensual, empowered pleasure. And then we can bring what we learn into real life. Um, and I also want to speak to like, I think that this idea of isolation definitely has its downside. And I think that we are going to have to come back around and recover from it.
Mhm.
But there is a beautiful aspect to people taking more time to be alone and to know self before they get into relationships or before they're having sex with other people. Um, and so I think I have so much faith in Gen Z. They're so incredibly intelligent.
Yes.
They're so incredibly aware. And I think they're gonna find a way to really have their own sexual revolution. I'm
And
really
like,
excited
and
about what
also
comes.
beyond the gender binary,
Yeah.
you know, um, they literally are just like, I'm not just bi, but I'm poly, I'm pan, and I love everybody, and I find sexual pleasure through everybody. So I think that's
Yes.
super liberating too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How did I even forget about that? Yeah, when I think of Gen Z, like I definitely trust that what you're saying is true. Like they may be having less sex in person, but I think that their knowledge around sex and around the vast, infinite expanse of what sexuality actually is extremely advanced. So we can definitely bring that knowledge into real life. We can do it.
I actually, now that you're making me think of it in a different way, if
Yeah.
if you are super knowledgeable about your body and about consent and about, just also what's been going on the last couple of years, then you would say no more often. You would, be okay with yourself and give self pleasure. So I hope you're
Mhm.
having sex out there, Gen Z, with yourself at least.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, I mean, they're also so incredibly knowledgeable about healing and about trauma and about psychology and about all different I just find Gen Z infinitely inspirational and I love being on TikTok and learning from everybody. So I think when they do come out, it's gonna be like the most evolved sex ever.
Oh my God. I feel like it's going to be the renaissance of the 60s and the 70s, but
Mm,
like multiplied with
hmm.
the sexual
Oh.
revolution coming back.
Yes, yes, and all their groovy clothing too.
Yes, yes. I'm like, I was born a decade maybe too early, but I'm right here with you guys.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I have so much hope for what's possible.
Yes. So was there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to touch upon?
Good question. Not in particular. I think that we had like such a juicy, gorgeous conversation. Thank you for opening up so many doorways to so many different topics.
Yes, I obviously love this topic. I told my mom when I was in college that I wanted to be a sex educator for young kids,
Mm,
and how to pleasure yourself. And because I really do believe kids should learn this stuff.
absolutely.
But then she said that I would be banned in schools. So I needed to find another profession.
I'm very passionate about this. I know a few people who have that same yearning inside of them to find the next evolution of sex education for children. Um, we so desperately need it. We so desperately need it. I can't think of their name right now, but there is a few incredible educators that I follow on TikTok that are teaching um, very consent-minded parenting and also how to create safe space for your children to explore their own sexuality in a way that's really age appropriate.
Mhm.
So people are doing the good work out there. But as far as bringing it into school systems, I think there's still a lot that we have to figure out.
Yeah. In the meantime, I will be your neighborhood auntie with parents' consent, obviously.
Yes.
So you have a podcast and you're active on TikTok. Is there any other avenue and how can people work with you?
Yeah. So I've got a couple of things going on. Everybody can find me at ambereros.com. That's where you'll find everything that I'm about to speak about. But you can find me on TikTok at Eros Embodied. And that's where I do a lot of my videos and things like that. You can also work with me one-on-one. I love to support people in the realm of healing their relationship to sexuality, but also in shadow integration and shadow work and shadow play. Love to play around with people in that arena as well. And I have a membership, which is called Coven. So I would love to just speak about that for a minute. It's a really affordable membership in which you can get my whole course on sex magic. And you can also get monthly pleasure master classes with me where I go into all of these topics in really rich detail and give people like really practical tools for how they can actually experience more pleasure, which has a lot to do with nervous system regulation and breath and movement and trying out new things. And then I also lead live guided sex magic rituals through my membership as well. So I can give you the link for that. And yeah, I'll also have a YouTube channel in the next month or so. So stay in touch. You can hop on my email list so that you can get all the updates in real time. And I would just love to work with all of you in any capacity.
Do you work with couples or just singles? Like,
I do work with couples. I do work with couples. And sometimes that looks like working with one person at a time. Sometimes that looks like working with them together. But I love to help couples really create liberatory and radically pleasurable sex.
ooh, and do you do in-person events?
I don't. I do it all through the World Wide Web right now, all through Zoom, but I'm definitely cooking up like how can we bring this into real life? That's
Oh,
definitely
I think you can. I mean,
yeah.
I think there's a market for this for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody's got any ideas, let me know. If anybody has any spaces that they'd like me to come and teach workshops in, or live events, or sex magic rituals, or whatever, I would love to bring this work into real life. I've really been coming to terms with that lately. Like, I want to work with people in real life, I
Yeah,
want to connect with people in person.
it is time.
It is.
Thank you so much, Amber. This was such a fun conversation. And I will have you on again, please.
Yes, I would love it. Thank you so, so much. Such a pleasure.